Okay, 8.24. Explain aerobic respiration. Okay, so that's with oxygen, but it's a lot more complex than that, right? So when we do this, we're going to talk about a couple different processes. So one very important one is called the link reaction. We're going to talk about the Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle basically is this circle down here. We're going to be talking about how this molecule NADH is so important. And I think we're going to save the electron transport chain for when we talk about something else. And yeah, these last two we're going to be talking about when we get to the other part. So let's do this. All right, so let's look at this first. So here is the cytoplasm. Okay, so this might be confusing. So remember we talked about glycolysis and we finally created our pyruvate? So here's one of our pyruvates right here. And it's just waiting outside in the mitochondria. And just so you can kind of get an idea of this picture, so we know that when we draw our mitochondria the right way, it's got a double layer, and that inner layer has all these folds in it, like this. And these little folds that kind of stick out, these peninsulas, if you want to think of it that way, are called cristae. So, like if you're looking at these are supposed to be the folds. That's what this is going. And there's a space here, and that's what this is supposed to represent. So the whole goal of this Krebs cycle is basically to get hydrogen. Here's one here. There's another one down here. To get hydrogens into this intermembrane space, this space in the mitochondria, between the mitochondrial membranes. Okay, I'm exhausted. So pyruvate comes into the mitochondria, and the first thing that happens is it binds up with this molecule called coenzyme A. So coenzyme A, we can just write as CoA. But if you notice, it only has two little spots in it for the carbons. So one carbon's got to go. Well, that's super sad. So this is our first molecule of carbon dioxide, right? Because one of the waste products in aerobic respiration is CO2. Also, NAD is reduced or oxidized? Reduced, right, is gain. Reduction is gain. So we get there. But remember, oil rig, you gain electrons, but you also lose oxygen. So that oxygen actually comes off, and the oxygens will form with this carbon to create our molecule of CO2, which we eventually breathe out. Okay, next, this coenzyme is going to bind it to this 4-carbon molecule. It just kind of hangs out there. You do not need to know the names of all these, what's the word I'm looking for? These intermediate molecules. So we can just say a 4-carbon molecule. So coenzyme A is going to attach those 2 carbons to it. So I really like this diagram because you can see the original purple ones that came for our pyruvate and the blue ones that just kind of hang out in the mitochondria. It binds it there. Our coenzyme A comes off and gets recycled. And now we've got a 6-carbon molecule down here. Well, we're going to knock a carbon dioxide off of it. This carbon dioxide here will be excreted from our body. Again, NAD is reduced to form NADH plus another hydrogen here that we will use later, which we'll talk about. That oxygen will bind to that carbon to produce our carbon dioxide, and we're done. We have a 5-carbon molecule. It happens again down here, the same process. Now we have a 4-carbon molecule. At the very end here, we have a different molecule that comes on. FAD is reduced because it's gaining oil rig, right? It's gaining a hydrogen here. We also, it requires a little bit of energy, so we need a little bit of, we produce ATP. We produce a little ATP here in this process, just a little step that finally gets us to our carbon 4 molecule, so it's ready to start the process again with our second pyruvate that we created from the molecule of glucose. And the whole process happens again. This is called the Krebs cycle.